Chapter 1. The Arrival. Commander Cale Thorne stood alone at the viewport of the TSS Valiant, watching the alien vessel drift closer like a serpent of silver light. The Virili. They called it sleek, elegant, and deliberately designed to make Terran ships look like primitive crates. Cale's reflection in the glass mirrored his tension, broad-shouldered, jaw set, and dark eyes scanning for meaning in the graceful curves of the enemy's gift-wrapped warship. He hated diplomatic games, and the Virili thrived on them. "They're early," he muttered, tugging at the collar of his dress uniform. His executive officer, Lieutenant Mira Chan, didn't look up from her datapad. "Of course they are. Virili doctrine. Control the tempo, control the terms." Cale exhaled through his nose, watching the ships approach slow to a theatrical crawl just before docking. He turned sharply from the viewport and walked toward the bridge. At 35, he was the youngest fleet commander in the Terran Systems Alliance. Not because he played nice, but because he played smart. But today, all his military instinct screamed, this isn't a negotiation. It's a performance. The Valiant's AI chimed, its voice precise and toneless. "Commander Thorne, the Virili vessel requests permission to dock. They carry a diplomatic envoy and a ceremonial offering." Cale paused. "Ceremonial offering?" Mira looked up, puzzled. That wasn't in the dossier. Cale arched an eyebrow. Virili never do anything without purpose. "Assemble the honor guard. Let's see what kind of circus this is." The docking bay lights gleamed like stage lighting. Cale stood at attention with a full guard flanking him. Uniforms crisp, expressions carefully blank. The airlock hissed. The crowd of onlookers, human and synthetic alike, held their breath. From the mist emerged 3 Virili, tall, angular, skin the color of emerald flame. Their fluid steps glided across the metal floor. At their head was Counselor Zoran, all smug poise and faintly amused eyes, the way one might greet a lesser species at a zoo. "Commander Thorne," Zoran said, with a bow so shallow it was practically a shrug. "The High Conclave sends its greetings, and a symbol of unity." Cale matched the bow with military precision. "The Alliance welcomes the Conclave's gesture." Zoran gave a small gesture. A 4th figure stepped from the shadows of the airlock. Cale's breath caught. She was Virili, yes, unmistakably. Green skin, luminous and smooth as carved jade. But unlike the others, her large eyes shimmered with color, not just black, violet, gold, rose, like oil on water. Her hair was white gold, falling in intricate braids down her back, laced with small glowing stones. She wore a form-fitting white gown that glowed faintly under the docking lights. Zoran's lips curled upward. "This is Saelari. She is the bride, a symbolic union between our peoples. We trust the humans will treat her well." Cale's jaw tightened. Myra's datapad beeped softly, an alert of diplomatic anomaly. Saelari stepped forward. Her expression was unreadable. Not afraid, not amused, just watching him, studying. Cale turned his gaze to Zoran. This wasn't part of any agreement. Zoran's smirk deepened. "Consider it a gesture of trust, a gift, or perhaps a challenge." Cale looked at Saelari again, and for the first time in years, he felt truly uncertain. Chapter 2. The Gift That Breathes. The door to Cale Thorne's private quarters slid open with a soft hiss. Saelari stepped inside before he could say anything. Her movements were deliberate, precise, as though each step had been trained and choreographed by a council more concerned with optics than her comfort. The glowing stones in her hair shimmered under the warm artificial lighting, casting faint rainbows on the matte metal walls. Cale followed her in, silent, uneasy. The doors closed behind them. "You're not a weapon," he said flatly, "but you're not a gift either." Saelari turned to face him, her voice low and melodic. "No, I'm a statement, one they thought you wouldn't dare return." She walked past the desk, letting her fingers skim along the edge. Her skin left a faint bioluminescent trail that faded after a moment, a natural byproduct of Virili biology, or perhaps a subtle reminder that she didn't belong here. Cale folded his arms. "Did they force you?" Saelari looked at him with those strange iridescent eyes. "Would that make this easier for you?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer. Not threatening, not quite, but close enough to make a point. I wasn't shackled, but I wasn't exactly given choices either. The High Conclave believes emotion is disorder, but they know how to use it when it serves their purpose. "And what purpose do you serve?" he asked, voice colder than he meant. A faint smile touched her lips. "To test your species. To embarrass you. To see what a primitive Terran will do when offered something he can't shoot or command." Kale turned away, running a hand through his hair. "They sent you here to make a fool of me. They sent me here because they thought I was disposable." That stopped him. He turned back to her. For the first time, there was no strategy in his expression, just quiet understanding. "I'm sorry," he said. Saelari blinked once, slowly. "You don't need to be. I know what I am to them. I want to know what I can be without them." She moved to the window, the viewport overlooking the stars. Her posture eased. Out there, the cold vacuum of space shimmered like a velvet sea. Somewhere beyond it, the Virili vessel waited in orbit, its diplomats sipping wine and laughing about their little joke. "Do you hate me?" she asked without turning. Kale shook his head. "No, I just hate being played." "That makes two of us." A silence stretched between them, not awkward, not tense, just real. He stepped beside her at the window. For a moment, they stood shoulder to shoulder. No rank, no politics. Just two people thrown together in a story neither of them chose. "I can arrange a diplomatic release," Kale said at last. "Send you back with dignity. Say you refuse the arrangement." But Saelari didn't move. "I think," she said quietly, "I'd like to stay." He turned to her, startled. She looked up at him with something new in her eyes. Not affection, not yet, but possibility. The faintest trace of something unscripted. "I've never been curious before," she whispered. "It's unsettling." Kale gave a small laugh. "Welcome to humanity." Chapter 3, Alien Among Us. The mess hall fell silent when she walked in. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks hovered halfway mouths. Lieutenant Mira-chan, seated at the far table, lowered her glass and said nothing, but her eyes narrowed. Saelari paused just inside the threshold. Her white gown shimmered faintly beneath the overhead lights, but her gaze was steady. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't retreat. She simply was. Kale stood beside her, arms relaxed at his sides, the commander's uniform sharp against the warmth of his presence. He cleared his throat. "Carry on." The room resumed its rhythm, slowly, nervously, like a machine rebooting. Saelari turned to him in a whisper only he could hear. "I believe I am what is the word? Unwelcome." "You're not," Kale said, though his jaw was tight. "But you weren't expected to come here like a guest." "Then what was I expected to be?" He looked down at her, her poise, her grace, her alien beauty, and exhaled. "A trophy. A puppet. Something kept out of sight." "Ah," she said softly. "Decoration." He didn't answer. Lieutenant Chan approached. Her brown eyes were sharp, her posture military perfect. "Commander, may I have a word?" Her tone was professional, but just barely. Kale nodded. "Of course." They stepped aside, and Mira wasted no time. "She can't stay unclassified. We don't know her protocol, her background, even her biology. She's not just some +1 at a diplomatic dinner." "I'm aware," Kale said. "With respect, sir, this isn't just personal. She's a Virili envoy. She could be a sleeper agent. She could be engineered." Kale's expression didn't change. "You think she's dangerous?" "I think this entire situation is," Mira replied. "You were put in check before the match even began." Kale glanced back at Saelari. She stood by the window, watching the stars again, as if they said more to her than the humans ever could. "She didn't ask for this," he said. "That doesn't mean we shouldn't be ready for what it turns into." Later that evening, in his quarters, Kale found her seated cross-legged on the floor. The glowing stones had been removed from her braids. Her hair now loose and soft around her shoulders. She was holding a Terran tablet. "I've been reading about your art," she said without looking up. "Your poetry. Your music. You make sadness beautiful." Kale leaned against the doorway. "We're not built to process pain logically, so we wrap it in something we can survive." She looked up. Do you feel that way about me? He hesitated. I'm still figuring that out. Saelari smiled faintly. Then we're even. Across the ship, whispers grew. Some called her the Green Bride. Others, the joke from the stars. A few simply called her alien, like that was enough. But a few of the crew, a young engineer named Lyra, a quiet medtech named Jorn, started saying hello, started sitting near her in the observation deck. Not many, but enough. And slowly, invisibly, the idea of her being there shifted from disruption to curiosity. Commander's log encrypted. The Varelli meant her as a tool, a message, a way to control the narrative of the treaty. But she's not what they expected. Neither am I. Chapter 4, The Conclave's Shadow. The Valiant Situation Room buzzed with low voices and flickering data streams. A holomap of the surrounding star systems hovered midair, glowing faintly. But no one was looking at the map. All eyes were on the incoming transmission from the Varelli High Conclave. The central screen displayed Archcounselor Ezekar, an ancient Varelli with features so angular they looked carved from crystal. His dark robe shimmered faintly with embedded code sigils, and his expression was unreadable, even for his own kind. Commander Thorn, Ezekar said, voice cool and deliberate. You have failed to return the diplomatic envoy as expected. Kale stood at the center of the room, Mira Chan flanking his left. There was no timeline provided, Counselor. Do not play at semantics with me, Terran. The envoy was symbolic. Her presence on your warship is not just irregular. It's dangerous. To her. To you. To our relationship. She's not a hostage, Kale replied calmly. She's not being held. She's chosen to remain. There was a pause. Then Ezekar laughed, a sound like chimes breaking in a windstorm. Chosen? You think that creature understands choice? Commander, Saelari is not a diplomat. She's an orphan of genetic waste. A failed hybrid. Myra's eyes snapped to Kale's. She'd read the biological scans. The anomalies in Saelari's DNA. But this confirmed it. Kale's fists clenched. Then why send her at all? Because even broken things serve purpose, Ezekar said coldly. And because we expected you to reject her. Your decision to keep her has shifted the balance of this treaty. You were meant to be offended. Instead, you've created a scandal. The feed cut before Kale could reply. Silence fell over the room. Later, in the medical bay, Kale found Saelari, sitting on the edge of an exam bed, legs dangling, quietly reading her bioscan report. Jorn, the medtech, gave Kale a nod and excused himself. You heard, she said without looking up. Kale stepped closer. I heard. She set the pad down. They were right. I'm a hybrid. Not entirely Varelli. Not entirely anything. Kale frowned. That doesn't make you broken. Saelari turned to him then, eyes luminous, but dimmed. To them it does. My eyes? My hair? Not normal. My emotional range? A defect. I was born in a genetics lab buried beneath Council Hall. Not bred. Not chosen. Just tolerated. Until I became useful. Kale sat beside her. You're not useful to me. You're real. That's more than I can say for half the diplomats I've met. She smiled, small but real. You're the first person who said that. Meanwhile, on the Varelli vessel, Counselor Zoran paced his private chamber, watching footage of Saelari from the Valiant security feeds, leaked by one of the automated protocols. He paused the video on a frame. Saelari in the observatory, surrounded by young Terran crew members. Laughing, he tapped a communicator. She's bonding with them, he said to the shadowy figure on the other end. It's not just a scandal anymore. If she's accepted, if they begin to see her as one of their own, she becomes a symbol. And symbols, the voice rasped, can topple empires. Back on the Valiant, Saelari walked with Kale through the starboard observation corridor. The stars spilled like shattered diamonds across the viewport. Ezekar's message, she said. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Kale nodded. They're scared. They wanted to humiliate us. But now they're afraid of what happens if we listen to you. Respect you. She looked up at him. I never meant to matter this much. None of the important ones ever do, Kale said. And then, softly, like a ripple through starlight. Her fingers brushed his. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. Chapter 5. The Retrieval Protocol. Red lights flared across the Valiant's command deck. Alert! Unauthorized vessel detected. Trajectory, intercept. Commander Cale Thorne was already moving before the klaxon finished its second wail. Report! He barked as he entered the bridge, the doors hissing open behind him. Lieutenant Mirachan didn't look up from the tactical display. Varelli stealth craft unmarked. It broke off from the diplomatic carrier 3 hours ago. It's just crossed into our sensor range. No transponder, no IFF. They're trying to slip in under our radar, Cale growled. Send out a warning ping. Prepare defensive shields. Sir, said Ensign Corin, voice tense. They're broadcasting a signal now, directed at our civilian quarters. Cale's blood ran cold. Scramble security, he snapped. They're not here to negotiate. They're here for her. Saelari sat alone in the dim meditation chamber, surrounded by softly pulsing lights that simulated the Varelli night sky. A gentle hum filled the room, background resonance meant to soothe. But her spine straightened. She felt it. Something wrong. Something cold and familiar. She stood just as the door slid open and Cale appeared, breath short, his voice urgent. They're coming for you. She didn't ask who. They won't talk this time, he added. They sent a covert retrieval team. Her expression didn't shift, not much, but her hands curled slightly, fingers flexing in memory or fear, or something darker. Then I suppose we must disappoint them. Deck 7, Cargo Junction E. 2 Varelli agents moved in near silence, tall, masked in obsidian half-helms, their armor almost ceremonial. They were called harvesters, not soldiers, not assassins, but reclaimers, and they had one objective: extract the hybrid by force or by stasis field. They didn't expect resistance. They certainly didn't expect the Terran commander to intercept them himself. Cale stepped into the corridor as the first harvester rounded the corner. His pulse rifle was already aimed. She's not yours, he said. The second harvester didn't hesitate. She activated her pulse blade, a humming arc of violet light. But before she could move, Saelari stepped into view, and the corridor changed. She was no longer the quiet, curious guest. She stood tall, regal, her white gown trailing behind her like a banner. Her eyes shimmered not just with light, but fury. You call me broken, she said to the harvesters, but I'm the only thing you ever created that learned how to choose. The harvesters hesitated just a beat. That was all Cale needed. A flash. A stun shot. The second harvester dropped. The first lunged, but Saelari moved faster. Not human fast. Varelli fast. She caught the attacker's arm, twisted it, and drove her elbow into the neck seam of his armor. The harvester collapsed, breath hissing through a damaged mask. Cale stared. Saelari breathed heavily, but steady. I'm done being reclaimed. Later, in Cale's quarters, she sat on the couch wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her hair was loose again, but damp from sweat. A bruise bloomed faintly under one eye, already fading. Cale poured 2 drinks and handed her one. You fought like you were trained for that. I was. In secret. Not for war. For containment. In case I ever lost control. He sipped, watching her. I didn't know they'd go this far, she added. I did, Cale replied. But I didn't know what you were capable of. Saelari met his gaze. I didn't either. Not until I had something I wanted to protect. They were quiet for a long time. Then she said it, softly, like it hurt, but was finally true. I don't want to go back. You're not going back, Cale said. He didn't touch her, but the space between them was electric. Their silence wasn't awkward now. It was full of something becoming. And outside the viewport, the stars watched without blinking. Chapter 6, The Return. 6 months later, the chamber was deathly quiet. Hundreds of Varelli delegates sat in tiered silence, their green skin glistening under the high dome lights of the council spire. Holographic banners shimmered along the curved walls, displaying Terran symbols beside the Varelli crest, a fragile piece, one breath from shattering. In the center of the floor stood Commander Cale Thorne, uniform sharp, eyes defiant. Beside him stood Saelari, no longer draped in ceremonial white, but in deep midnight blue robes woven from both Terran and Virelli threads. Her long hair was pulled back in braids of silver and copper, and her hands rested gently atop the soft rise of her stomach. The silence broke like glass. "She returns." Counselor Theron hissed. "Pregnant? With his child?" "She returns as a threat," added another. "A symbol of decay. Corruption." Saelari stepped forward. "No, I return as proof that evolution cannot be controlled." The room rippled with murmurs. "I was created in a lab and discarded like ash," she continued, voice steady, clear. Then handed off as a joke. A mockery. A gift-wrapped insult. She turned slowly, letting the entire chamber see her. "But I made choices. I learned. I felt. I changed. That was not your design. You claim this child unites us," Theron snapped, "but divides us." "No," Saelari said calmly. "You divided yourselves. I merely refused to stay in pieces." Kale stood behind her, silent but unshakable. "This child will be both of your worlds," Saelari said, looking now to the Terran representatives in the gallery above. "But more importantly, it will be its own, not bound by your fear, not defined by your past." She rested a hand on her stomach again, smiling faintly. "You tried to make me a weapon. I became a witness." Back aboard the Valiant, the transmission from the Virelli Council ended. The treaty would hold, but it would be rewritten, with clauses about interspecies protection, genetic rights, and individual sovereignty. And at its center, Saelari's testimony. Not as property, not as an envoy, as a citizen of the galaxy. Some weeks later, in a quiet garden on one of the Alliance's neutral colonies, Saelari sat beneath a blooming sky tree. Her bare feet pressed into soft grass, and a low sun warmed her skin. The wind carried scents of alien flowers and Terran herbs. Kale arrived with a datapad and 2 drinks. "Council sent another message," he said, sitting beside her. "Still furious?" "Less than last week." She smiled. "Progress." He placed a hand gently on her belly. The child moved beneath. "When they're born," he said softly, "what name will we give them?" Saelari leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've been thinking," she said. "Something not Virelli, not Terran. Something new, like they'll be." Kale nodded. "Then we'll make one." They sat in silence as 2 stars rose, one gold, one blue, and the sky bloomed with light.